Matt,
Hello? Yes? Well, I'm
how
here.
do you know what is best in life? For example, if you were...
Someone asked me this. A con,
if someone
maybe.
were to ask you this, and you were to say, to crush your enemies, to see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of their women.
That was going to be my answer, yeah.
That's three things. But, like, are each of those equally enjoyable? Are those all
Right.
best? Or should there be some sort of ranking system? Should we organize the things that are best in life into divisions of bestness? You know, some sort of some ranking or step system. Do you see what I'm getting at here? I'm struggling to come up with like a
word for it. That's okay. As nerds, we like classifying things and ranking things. So I feel like this is a good approach, right? Let's figure out some ranks. Oh, tiers maybe? A tier list?
Yes, a tier list. Exactly. Let's organize things into tiers. I think everything
like tears in the rain. And the great thing about tier lists, Rob, as far as I can tell from the internet, is they're really great at making people mad, right? Because they're spicy hot takes, and not everyone will agree.
Well, and of course they could never be wrong because it's in a tiers. It's organized, right? You can put you put little boxes in the little how's that wrong? Like that's practically science, Matt. So of course it's going to make people mad.
Our goal here is to put all of the published adventures for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, now that it is finally wrapped, into a tier list, thus making every nerd mad. And again, if you disagree with us, just remember it's just our opinion. We're just two guys.
Just two guys. Yeah, it's Dungeon Master of None.
I'm Dungeon Master Matt.
And I'm Dungeon Master Rob, and this is a very special, at least 2-part episode, where Matt and I are going to go through all... Okay, well, not
There's 30 or so.
26 of the 30 or so adventures, not counting some of the...
I think we'll throw them up there just to be fun.
Okay.
We're gonna talk about
30,
Out of the Abyss, Turn of Fortune's Wheel, even things like Ricky Morty. We might throw up there. Rob and I have read through. I think I counted up. It's around 5,700 pages of adventures. So, and don't feel bad for us. We put this on ourselves.
We did this to ourselves. Also, some of these we've already read. I only had to read. I only had to read 1,000 new pages or so for this. So it's fine.
Link in the show notes. We have done previous podcasts on many of these adventures. I think I told this up too. I think we've done 22 hours of 5th edition dungeon and module reviews. And of course, our ranking system will be incredibly messed up because some of these are short campaigns. Some of them are like 15-level long campaigns. Some of them are anthologies, right? That are vary wildly from chapter to chapter. So, yeah.
Yeah, we make no promises about the quality or accuracy of this tier list because, again, we are in some cases comparing apples to oranges. But you know what? They're all adventures. They're all 5th edition. They all got to go in the tier list. So there you go.
It's not that hard. Apples are better than oranges. I don't really get that. Speaking of apples being better than oranges, so I think a lot of 5e adventures. I just want to get some things out there about 5th edition adventures.
I have many thoughts
in my opinion,
after reading these, after listening to some of our old episodes. I have a lot of thoughts about the 5th edition adventure library, I guess let's call it.
Yeah, no, we've got a huge selection, and I mean, there's some things to really like about them.
Yeah,
I think they all have great art. They're really, really good at putting together amazing set pieces, and I would say for most of them, maybe not all of them, they have kind of cool concepts at their core.
Some are really cool, some are just kind of cool, and I think there's something to like in almost every one of them, and there's a lot to like in some of them. this is a pretty good set of adventures, and especially considering that it wasn't always this cadence, but it's at least 3 adventures a year for 10
Right.
years. Like that's a lot.
Yeah. It's funny. They've gone through like weird phases where there was like, we're doing this adventure. We're releasing a ton of Adventure League supplements. They're all set in the Forgotten Realms to, we're doing adventures in our old campaign settings to, we're just making adventures. They're set nowhere. It's really run the gamut. I have found that reading through all of these, a negative thing, right? If a great thing is they often have great concepts and great set pieces, is that a general critique is that most of these adventures really fail on a lot of the like connective tissue, the like how to get your players from point A to point B, how to let them muck around, how to like run these things, how to organize your stuff. The connective tissue problem is one we'll probably highlight when it's really bad, but just know that often the links between parts of the adventures are often a guy shows up and he makes you go there, or a guy shows up and he tells you to go over here.
I agree. This is a consistent problem. The other thing that I noticed, and this is neither good nor bad, is that reading the adventures starting from Phandelver and Tyranny of Dragons all the way up to Quest from the Infinite Staircase, is that WotC never really figured out a coherent design philosophy about their adventures. You can identify distinct phases in sort of like how they approach adventures, and there's good things and bad things about both. I would contrast this with Paizo, which has a very, very strong design and brand identity, which isn't to say that like when you pick up an adventure, you know what you're getting. They are very innovative within the framework that they have. But when you pick up a book, you know how it's going to be organized, sort of like what it's going to cover, what it's going to look like, and
right.
What sort of like quality the writing is going to be, the pieces are all going to be there. And this is not the case with Wizards of the Coast 5th edition books at all.
Yeah, no, it's you can tell there's like a lot of turnover in the creative offices. It's really like just Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins are the only ones who are the consistencies.
Yeah.
Early adventures are often not even written completely by WotC. They're written by third-party studios. And then I think another big point to mention is that a lot of these adventures are not always what's on the hype or marketing tin. Often there's a lot of like
that's a good point.
Articles that WotC will put out about, this adventure is really good at doing this one thing, and then you read the adventure and you're like, well, you kind of made it sound like this adventure was Mad Max and hell, and actually that's only 3 pages of it.
A small part.
Yeah. And then I'll also, I think my next to last big picture thing is one that is a little negative, which, as I think, and Rob, correct me if I'm saying this right, the glup shitification coined by our friends at Rascal News, Chase Carter and Lynn Katega, is that as the adventures progressed, there's a lot of adventures where they just put in a character from the brand or a thing from the brand, and nothing is really done with that. Well, you might be like, hey, I love seeing a reference and noticing it. For me, that does very little for me.
Yeah, this is a consistent problem with D&D. It has always been like ever since Elminster and Drizzt Do'Urden and all of Gygax and Greenwood's dudes have become like major figures. There are often like winks and nods to those. So this is not a new problem, but Matt's correct that it really accelerates in the later years of 5th edition. And there's like, look, it's a guy. You love this guy, don't you? And that is annoying.
Converse to that acceleration, I believe like the the editing, in some of the early adventures, like I noticed like typos or spelling mistakes and stuff like that. At least that went away.
That's true.
Well, there may be other inconsistencies that went away. The other thing is I noticed is the lesson. It took everyone 10 years to learn it, both in Dungeons and Dragons and in everything else, which is the worst thing you could ever do as a company is to create a mystery box. Many of these adventures had like references to, oh, there's this big mystery going on. We don't know what it is. There's obelisks somewhere. And of course, that never panned out to anything very interesting, though, of course, we'll talk about it in detail when we get to the specific adventures. But yes, never do a mystery box.
Never do a mystery box. I have one other. It's actually really hard to say anything definitively about the whole body of work, but the one thing that I will say about every single adventure that I have read, almost without exception, and this is maybe personal preference, but is that all of them have cruft. All of them have too much junk. There is almost no exception to this. Every adventure has stuff that could and should be cut. Just sometimes a lot, sometimes a little, but there's always something. Wizards has, for its entire existence, and 5th edition is no exception, just been not very good at editing. Just not very good at and the cutting part of editing. And some adventures are better than others. I will say that the ones that are not, where either new writers or third parties were brought in are less bad about this. But every single adventure is just, there's a whole lot that just could be done away with. And they never do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when you're reading one of those like nearly 300-page adventures, sometimes you're like, does this really need to be a 2-year campaign when it could be a 1.5-year campaign with some of the chaff cut out? I agree 100% on that. Should we talk about how are we going to organize these tiers? How are we going to decide what's best in adventuring life?
Sure. Well, I have a list of criteria, and this is what I've always used.
Cool.
But
let's go back and forth on these because I have a list too.
Okay, so like my number one, let's start with like the most important thing, and this is because of who I am as a GM, but I also think it's like what's most relevant is the module, is the adventure interesting or unique? And let me just spend a little time on this to explain why I think this is important, because it is not. Anyone can come up with a unique idea, and its execution is very important. So like, it's not just like having a wild idea, it's having a wild idea that's well executed. But the reason why this is so important is that we now have 50 years of adventure modules like available to us. And there's still a lot of room for innovation because like 90% of those are like, here's a fucking dungeon crawl. So I don't think this is a particularly big ask, but I do ask it. And so if an adventure needs to have either an interesting or unique setting or hook or premise or interesting or unique NPCs or whatever, it does not need to be like avant-garde or something, but
right.
I'm looking for a reason why this is better than just rereading a good module from the 90s, you know?
Right, yeah. You've got to give me a reason that I can get myself excited to run someone else's stuff, right?
Right.
Because most dungeon masters, if you're like us, we have plenty of our own ideas. More than enough to like ever get through in our dungeon mastering lifetime. So for us to run someone else's module, and both Rob and I have run plenty of published modules, it's got to be a cool idea. And I would also say, right, for me, the thing building on that is like, is the execution there, right?
Yeah.
Is the am I reading through this and I can see how players are moved in the direction the plot wants to go? Or does like none of the villains' plans make sense, right? Does none of the world make sense? Does none of like what's actually happening here make sense and is fun for players to interact with, right? So along with the cool concept, what I'm looking for is a good execution of that concept.
I wrote this down too. I called it, is it well written? Is it well organized? Is is it executed well? Is it exactly a perfect way of putting that? So that was also key on my list.
So I think. Oh yeah, go ahead.
My next big one. Sorry, does that count as one of yours? You want to do yours?
Well, no. Here's my biggest one, which is, does the adventure? Okay, so these are written adventures, right? You got to have the whole, book laid out. You can't run it exactly like you might run a campaign where you're making it up, 5 sessions ahead of your players as they play through it. But I look for published adventures that promote player agency, choice, creativity, and freedom, right? And this doesn't always have to be you can go anywhere you want and do anything you want. It can often be agency in how to solve a problem, how to deal with the villain, how to deal with your allies, how to approach a heist that you have to do. It can be in the small things or it can be in the big things. But if an adventure is written in a way where there's only one way to do things, that's usually a problem for me, because I often ask the question, well, what if my players do something that's not that? Does the entire campaign fall apart, and therefore I have to make sure they do something exactly like this? Otherwise, it doesn't work. That's the biggest thing for me.
I think that's very important. I think that's a great criteria. Do your players, will it work if your players actually act like they have agency within the world? I think that's critically important. My second most important criteria is the adventure useful to me as a GM or any GM? And this specifically means, can I steal from it, or can I adapt it easily? And now we
have the exact same second criteria. We did not discuss these before.
We did not discuss it.
Yeah.
I think that it is okay if a adventure works well, only if it is run as written. I think that's fine. I think it is totally fine. That's just that is sort of like a ding to me. You can still have a great adventure, but if I can't easily borrow or steal or adapt it, if it's too rigid, if it needs to be run too specifically, then that is less interesting to me. So I think that it is important. It can still have a strong driving plot and theme and things that you need to stick to, but there are some that are written in such a way that are very easy for you to borrow from. And so this is a very important criteria for me in judging the quality of an adventure.
The fun thing about this criteria is that even some of the adventures we like the least still have great stuff to steal from that you can, I'll yoink this chapter out and put it in my game.
Yeah, there are some interesting adventures that we've talked about that overall we didn't like, that had some really cool parts in them. And that's great. There are also some that I liked that would be very hard to borrow from. And we'll talk about, we'll get to it. But there are some that really are kind of constrained in that way, and there's some that are not.
I'll also add as a criteria, right, is does this adventure work for 5e? For the actual game system of Dungeons and Dragons? I kind of had to put this one in here because I feel like there are some that are like, wow, this really makes you want to play a better character, or wants the players who are playing the campaign to play a better character, to advance and interact and engage with the systems of the game. And there are some other adventures that are like, this would actually be a fun adventure if you played it in a completely different system.
I was listening to some of our episodes on these adventures to refresh myself, and we said that I heard us say that in at least 2 of them, is that this would be better in X system. That's a really good one, Matt. That isn't one that's always in the back of my mind. That isn't one that I wrote down. But yeah, there are some that are great adventures, but not for this system. And we'll discuss them when we get to the tiers.
Yeah.
What's
your other ones?
My third one, and I don't have too many other big categories, just general ones, but I just wrote down characters, NPCs, locations, I guess just material provided. Is there a cool town? Are there cool NPCs? Are there good stats for monsters? Are there good magical items? All the adventures have some of these, and I'll be honest, for the most part, I don't like most of them. They sometimes it feels like D&D thinks
Right. Often when you write an adventure, you have to put in 50 NPCs.
Yeah.
And by the 47th one, it's the description of the NPC gives you as the DM nothing to work with.
Yeah. So if the adventure includes NPCs that are interesting and memorable to me, same with like locations, same with items, same with monsters, that's notable. And that's rare because, they all include them. And I've read, dozens and dozens and dozens of descriptions of all of these things. And they're usually not bad, but they're usually not very interesting. So if they are interesting, if they are well done, that's a big plus for me, because going back to my previous point, those are especially easy to borrow. If there's a cool item, a cool location, a cool NPC, a cool monster, that you can just pick that up and drop that somewhere else. That's an important, that's sort of like a garnish for me. That's a nice thing to have. I'm not going to make a huge decision on that, but it does matter.
Right. I think my garnish is characters, right? The player characters. Are the player characters the star of this adventure? Are they the main characters? Or or do they not really matter, and actually a cool NPC is way more important? Related to this, is character creation and like motivation integrated well into the game? And you might be thinking, oh, wow, well, it has to be an adventure where the characters are directly linked to this. No, like character motivation could be as simple as you want to be adventurers, but like, does that work well with the adventure? Is there material given to help you integrate the characters you make to the campaign? So, are the characters the star? Are you given tools to help players make good characters for this specific campaign?
Yeah, I wrote this down as a minor note that I don't know how I would weight this, but it is important to me that the hook, the character hook, like the reason for participating in the campaign is good. Like Matt said, it can be as simple as your adventurers, but it needs to work with the campaign. And some adventures have great compelling hooks that just you're off, and I really like them. And others are like, why should my characters care about this? Why would they be involved in any of this? And that's important.
And then lastly, this one doesn't really count as a criteria, but it's just a personal bugaboo, is after rereading and reading these so many times, the one thing that annoys me more than anything else is when something is explained through magical crystals. There are magical crystals growing on something. A faction is collecting crystals. Something needs to be encased in crystals. This is late. It speaks to the overall quality, I think, because it means the writer couldn't come up with a cool way that magic works, so they just wrote in crystals and a bunch of question marks. And why this bugs me is because when you can explain how something works, then your players can interact with it and mess with it. And when it's magical crystals are doing a thing, it's laziness. We've seen it a million times before.
That's a good one, crystals. I have a one that's a little bit less petty, but is still petty, and that's just my final criteria is dungeons. Are there too many? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they boring? Are they annoying to read? I have read.
Did they forget to key them? That happens sometimes.
Did they forget to key them? Did they key them badly? Is the map confusing? Do I get confused? Look, I have problems with spatial awareness. So if the map is three-dimensional and it's not very well described, or if it has if it operates in 3 dimensions, if you're above this room and the chute goes down to this one, blah blah blah, that annoys me. I get annoyed. I'm my mind palace. I'm rotating cubes in my mind. I'm stressed. I'm unhappy. So the dungeon needs to be good. If there are too many, that's also annoying. I've never had a group of players that was like, oh boy, another dungeon. When I am running a written module, they're always like, oh god, another dungeon, every single time. So this is almost every book on this list fails this criteria. Just an FYI. Every 5th edition book has too many dungeons and they're not good enough. But this is something that I was looking out for.
And that's a nice transition point, which is if you've read enough published adventures, you will know that no published module will work well for you and your players without tweaking and modification. So it's not a question of if you need to like modify and fix and change some things, it's a question of how much. And the answer to how much is going to depend on, one, how good the written campaign is, and then two, your personal preferences. So no written campaign is perfect, and no written campaign is perfect for every group. It's just a question of degrees. And then when that degree gets too big, it's just no longer worth it to DMs like Rob and myself. And then that knocks it down the tiers. And if you're on the top of the tiers, your book gets sent on Voyager 3 into space for the aliens to see.
Okay, so we have 5 tiers, which are currently labeled S, A, B, C, and F. And if you understand how tiers work, that's pretty self-explanatory. Do we want to get more creative with these tiers, Matt?
Yeah, sure. I think we should. Though I know people are dying to get to the adventures. What do we want to call the? I would say I'll start off. I would say the S tier. Like these are like campaigns you'll talk about forever, right?
Okay.
This is going to be like a really, really, really memorable and amazing game that you're gonna love to run, love to play in. And, your players will be like, wow, remember that one time in, well, no spoilers, one of the campaigns. How's that for a name?
Okay, great. Unforgettable campaigns.
Okay, that's a better...
Let's just call it the unforgettable tier. Let's make this simple.
Okay, cool.
All right.
What about the A tier?
Our A tier. Let's call this. These are good. These are great even, but you probably won't run them a second time. Yeah, that they live. You know, they have a special place in your heart and your players' hearts. So let's call them. Let's call this let's call this the Paragon tier.
Okay, the Paragon tier. For me, these are campaigns that with just a few minor tweaks, they're going to work great. But they probably won't need a year of work to get them to work. And maybe they won't be the most amazing campaign of all time, but they'll be so good that maybe your players won't talk about them for the rest of your life, but for a long time.
So B, I've kind of been thinking of as, as your real lunch pail campaigns, workmanlike. You had to put some effort in. There were some problems, but there was a lot of good, and you liked them, and they're real, craftsmen. You're not gonna necessarily put these on a pedestal in a museum or anything like that. But for the working man, they're good enough.
Yeah. That sounds good to me. Like for me, it's often they're ones that you're going to have to put a lot more work in, a major rework for them to be good. Unlike maybe the ones in the A and S tier. What about C tier? I would say that there's probably stuff to salvage here, but this is getting into the territory of this is not worth the effort to fix it up. What do you think?
I mean, I was going to call them fixer-uppers, which can kind of be a mixed bag. Sometimes a fixer-upper isn't worth a fixer-uppering,
A fixer-upper, right? Yeah, you might have to trash this one, but hopefully, if you really like it, right, you can do it. And then F tier, this is probably the land of there's no way to salvage these. Mm-hmm. We'll probably have to put some lazy cash grabs down here.
I mean, the only thing that's going to make it here, and I don't know what to call this yet, but it's things that I felt insulted reading. I felt like my time wasters actually is what I would call this.
Okay.
Even the ones in the B and C tiers that I didn't like, I didn't feel like they were a huge waste of time to read, but there's a couple that I wish I hadn't read, and that's rare because I'm easily amused, and if I felt like there was nothing to enjoy about a book, that's pretty bad.
Yeah. Okay, I like that. Ones that insult either our intelligence, our our ability to stomach references and jokes, our ability to believe that this would actually work with player characters. All right, Rob. I'm thinking we should probably go, I don't know, we could go in alphabetical order. We could go, I was thinking reverse chronological order.
You suggested reverse chronological, so let's do that and just work backwards from the present.
Okay. Our first one is actually one that if you subscribe to our Patreon, you can listen to a whole hour and 10 minutes of us discussing quests from the Infinite Staircase, which is 6 adventures that are republished, all of them from the early 80s.
So I forgot to mention this when we were talking about our criteria, but like because I place so much of a premium on being interesting and unique, it is almost impossible for one of these republished anthologies to be rated higher than maybe a B in my tier list. And maybe, Matt, you disagree, but like even there are a couple of these, and Wizards has done it a few times, that I liked. But even the ones that I liked, I'm like, I can't really recommend this too highly. So
yeah. So this one, in my opinion, has 2 pretty good modules, 2 very middling modules, and 2 ones that I absolutely think are trash. The 2 like pretty good ones are the Lost City and the Beyond the Crystal Cave. So it's got 2 okay ones, but yeah, this is firmly in like maybe you should just buy those 2 modules on the DM's Guild.
This one for me, it's not an F, but I would struggle to put it above a C. I think this is a fixer-upper at best.
This is exactly what we meant by the C tier. Yeah. It's a fixer-upper.
Fixer-upper. There's good parts in it, and I didn't dislike reading it, but like I can't recommend it too much. It's just too much that you have to fiddle with. If you just want one of the adventures, just buy one of the adventures. Yeah.
Yeah. I think they made Beyond the Crystal Cave a little better. I think they made The Lost City worse. And as we discussed on our episode, they made Expedition of the Barrier Peaks way more annoying.
A lot worse.
Yeah. So sorry about that. And I guess on the modules, we should also talk about the framing device. This one has the absolute worst framing device of any of the anthology adventures. I should have labeled the anthology ones, but you'll get it as we're talking.
You'll figure it out. Fortunately, it was short, but the framing device part of Quest from the Infinite Staircase did feel insulting to me. But that's not enough to sink it to insult tier because the rest of it was fine.
Yeah. So our Quest from the Infinite Staircase, it is placed in the C tier. We reserve the right to adjust these up and down as we get the other ones to compare them to.
We may change this as we go, but that feels right for right now.
Okay. All right. On to Vecna, Eve of Ruin. This is a 10 through 11 level adventure. It is one of the big ones, an ultimate, plane spanning race of a series of 7 fetch quests to stop Vecna from remaking the universe. We did a whole episode on this one. Rob, what are your thoughts on Vecna, Eve of Ruin?
Well, Matt, let me know if you think that I am being too harsh, but this is one of the ones that I was considering solidly an F tier. I think that this was an insult to me and to you, to everyone who spent money on it, to the entire Dungeons & Dragons community, to all of the effort that they put into seeding this adventure. I was listening to our old episodes about other adventures, and we'll get to them, and reminding myself all the times that obelisks were there. They were hinted at being very obviously a part of Vecna's big plan, which went nowhere. If they're going to do some glup shitofication of multiversing around and then not have a big Infinity War payoff, then what the fuck's the point? Anyway, this was lazy. There's not a lot to borrow from. It's not very well written. It has nothing. It has no memorable NPCs, locations, monsters. It's a big wet fart, in my opinion. F.
Yeah, this one is F tier for me as well, just because it's it's a failure conceptually of like what makes like an adventure good. It doesn't play into the fantasy of what fighting a Vecna or a Vecna cult could be like. Structurally, it's a boring, repetitive MacGuffin fetch quest. It's not good adventure module writing. A lot of these fetch quests, as Rob mentioned, are not interesting. It's not a good high level adventure. The like plot twists don't make sense. The NPCs could solve it together. The final fight is and like depiction of it is boring. The obvious like thing sitting on the table there about Vecna and Kasa's relationship is completely underdeveloped. It is. I put together, I think, a 17-page suggestion for revisions.
I remember
and
this.
If you need
you put too much effort into this.
pages.
Yes.
We'll probably add
theoretical
links.
Good story about this, but like
it's not in this module.
It's not
though,
in this module.
So.
Yeah.
So
this was
if
bummer.
you're interested in saving this, we're bummed this one wasn't better. We'll put a link in the show notes to my suggestions for the remix and explanations for why a lot doesn't work. Rob, so one of the things I put together is a list of it's really hard to tell how popular these ones are. But I looked at who subscribes to subreddits based on these adventures. And of the new adventures, this one by far is the most popular with around 1,900 subscribers, which, again, it just came out. So, that's not a lot of subscribers, but still for the new ones, it's one of the more popular ones. So people want the sad thing about this one is the concept is great. Everything else fails about this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
On from Vecna. Turn of Fortune's Wheel. This is the adventure that came in the Planescape campaign setting. And if I remember correctly, this is one where you also go on very, very short quests all around the gate towns of the Outlands. And so this one is like very similar to Vecna Eve of Ruin in that every like section is like a very short chapter. This one also is much less developed because this is like a 90-page adventure. And as we discussed in our episode on this one, the villain's plan doesn't make any sense, and like everything would be better if the players just like left.
Yeah. So this is weird because it is a lot like Vecna Eve of Ruin. You're going on a big they really thought they had something with the multiverse. Like they really thought they were going to be able to cash in on that Marvel multiverse wave, not realizing that everybody was already tired of multiverses, and also they did it badly. But yeah, your players are glitches and they're in Sigil and Matt, I have to like catch myself on this one because like I need to be aware of the ones where I have personal investment in the setting or something.
We love Planescape so much.
Planescape. So like just because I'm specifically very mad about how they did this, I have to judge semi-fairly. And I mean, it's bad. It's not very good. You're just going on like a stupid theme park to a bunch of gate towns. You're not even going to other planes. I think that there is some that you can steal from this adventure, which is a distinct improvement over Vecna. There are parts that are good. There is at least one part that made me laugh, which was the section entitled Angels in the Outlands, where you play Spireball with angels in the Outlands, which all of this together makes me want to put this in a C tier. I want to put this above F, though I'm willing to be convinced otherwise.
This is tough because the last year you can tell like people have been busy working on the new edition is full of bad ones. This one I think is solidly F tier in that one encounter. Like there are way more interesting things in Vecna Eve of Ruin to steal from than that one Angels in the Outfield. I say this one is worse than Vecna Eve of Ruin. I mean, it suffers from being shorter, but yeah, the whole like glitch thing.
See,
a
shorter
cool
is better.
concept,
It means I spent less
completely
time suffering on this one, Matt.
It's not how much you suffered. This is not a tier list of how much you suffered. This is a tier list of
you know
is
what?
it good.
You know what? I'm on board. I just remembered that Mort is in this, the talking skull from
Yes.
Planescape Torment, and he's annoying, and that made me mad enough that I think this is an F tier. No, Matt, you're right. This is bad. There's actually not really anything good in here. I wanted to be nice, but no, this is bad.
No,
Yeah, this is a waste.
It sucks. Hey, if you're watching or listening to this, just know there are some of these we actually really like. It's just been a pretty bad last 2 years.
It has been a pretty bad past 2 years. Okay, so Turn of Fortune Wheel. I think that's right. I think I need to be strict with my grading. This is an F for sure.
Yeah, this is if Vecna is an F. This one's got to be an F.
That's true.
Okay. So next up we have Phandelver and Below: The Shattered Obelisk. This is a 200-page adventure that'll take your players from the beginning to 11th level. This one's a little complicated in that the first half of the Shattered Obelisk is very similar to the very first adventure that we'll talk about here, Lost Mines of Phandelver. But then they add a quest where you have to fight some mind flayers that are going to transform the town into like a terrible farland hellscape. And they've also changed the first part. Rob, I really wanted to like this because, again, I was like kind of interested in the idea of these Netherese obelisks that have been everywhere. This one adds one of those. Instead of having to do with like time travel or something like that, it allows the mind flayers to like take over Phandelver. The second part, the kind of new part, is kind of a race to get 3 fragments, but it's not really a race.
More
None
MacGuffins.
of this actually. It's more MacGuffins, but the MacGuffins don't actually matter. There are, I think, of all of the adventures I have read, there are more inconsistencies in logic in this one than almost any of the other adventures.
That's really saying something, because there's a lot of adventures with some truly tortured leaps of logic.
And the reason that this one really sucks is because Lost Mine of Phandelver is really good, and they've actually changed a lot of it, and in my opinion, kind of made it worse. From the very first encounter to all of the kind of sandboxy elements that kind of get you through the second stage of the campaign, this one's a real disappointment. Not only does it not continue I think it will, no spoilers for Lost Mine, but it's pretty good. Doesn't pretty continue good. That goodness. It goes straight to really, really boring, really, really railroady, and really just baffling, like how the thing actually works. Like there's one thing where you have to find 3 fragments of an obelisk. One's in a mine. And it's like, how did it get there? It was put there by a wizard. That's all it literally says. The second is right next to a mind flayer who, again, wants this MacGuffin. There's a tower in his way. He's a hyper-intelligent mind flayer. He hasn't figured out how to get around the tower. It just doesn't make any sense. It's a lot of mines. Instead of Mine of Phandelver, there's mines.
Matt, it came out in September 19th of 2023, which is... within striking distance of the release of Baldur's Gate
9/11. Yeah.
And I am the one who is wondering if this was like rushed to get out at the same time as Baldur's Gate 3 and ride that Mind Flayer wave.
Yeah. Maybe that was it. This to me reeks of shitty cash grab of people being like, 1, Mind Flayers, 2, obelisks, 3, we know Lost Mine is good, maybe I'll buy this. I would say never get this one, only get the original Lost Mines, because they've really made it worse. And also they have this habit that I noticed in both Vecna, or not Vecna of Ruin, Turn of Fortune Wheel, and this one, where the final encounters take place not in a dungeon or a map location, but a series of set piece encounters where there's just the map of the set piece, and you just go from one to another in a straight line, and there are no like player choices or investigation. This one really start this. Rob, I'm going to say this one, it's hard to rank it because it does have some of the good parts of Lost Mines of Feldever, but like making it worse feels like a desecration and an insult to me. So I don't really know where to put this one. I would say somewhere in the.
It sounds like an F to me.
F,
like
F
I know
tier.
that we're starting out with like a real like negative collection, but I promise you, listeners, watchers, they will not all be Fs.
I will say it's better than Planescape just because of the original parts of Lost Mine that are in there. But again,
I mean, this
with
is our
the
criteria,
caveat,
Matt. If you felt insulted reading it, and it sounds like you did, then it's an F.
I was incredibly insulted.
That's the rule. So okay.
Okay.
We
Next
divided
up-
and conquered some of these. So Matt had Phandelver and Below, and now he's got Keys from the Golden Vault, which I
Right.
did read part of, and we
Yes.
discussed reviewing, but I think we were both very weary of 5th edition, and then a bunch of other things happened, so we never got to it. But we did mean to talk
Yeah.
about it. So
this
Matt,
is
tell us
another-
about Keys from the Golden Vault.
This is another anthology adventure, right? And this one has a ton of pretty short, they could be 1 or 2 shot anthologies. I believe there's 13 in total, and they're themed around heists. And Rob and I both love planning, running, playing in heists. It's one of our favorite things. Here's the good and the bad of this adventure is that there are, just like all of the anthologies, some really shining star adventures here. Some really great heists that you can either tweak or some of them you can honestly run as they are, and they're quite great. One of the things that really sucks is the framing device. I didn't dig at all. You kind of work for a Mission Impossible organization that only has the loosest connections. You can kind of tell this anthology was all written by different writers, and it's not going to work as a whole adventure. But for plopping in and other things, it's great. One of the sad things, though, is you could easily cut one of these heists and use that space to have advice on how do you run heists. Because it's not something that's in the DMG for 5th edition, and there's a lot of assumptions here that I think people aren't going to know. However, if you know how to run heists, if you know how to say, okay, you got to have this gathering information phase, this planning phase, you got to know something about the score, there's some really good ones here. I would say there is one that is S tier in itself. There's probably 3, and that's the Merkstone, the very first one. There are 3 or 4 that are solid A tier. The Stygian Gambit, Masterpiece Imbroglio, and Talkworth's Clockworks. There are some here that are really, really stinkers that are, and I mean this not only because they're bad, but because they're technically not heists. They're just dungeon crawls, like Reach for the Stars and Sidorant's Vault and Shard of the Accused that are like, hey, that one's just a mystery. It can't really work as a heist. There's no way for players to plan or things. But I would say most of the other ones are solid B tier. So I would say overall, this is an okay anthology, and all of them being very short really helps, because if one sucks, you can kind of chunk it.
Okay. I'm trusting you on this one, Matt. Tell us where to put it.
Okay, well, I'm just comparing it to other anthologies. I would say it's better than the Infinite Staircase. I don't know if that's at the top of C tier or B tier.
No,
I'm going to say let's put it in B tier right now, because I really enjoyed reading it.
See, that sounds good. Let's put it in B tier. That sounds like a B tier to me.
Great. Now I just have to find the cover of it. Everyone in the watching the video shouting at me, there it is, there it is. I can't see it. Here it is. Keys from the Golden Vault, our first B tier.
All right. Next up, we have Dragonlance. Shadow of the Dragon Queen came out in December of 22. This was much anticipated. This was a big deal. We had not seen any new Dragonlance in a decade or more, and suddenly, that stopper was uncorked, and we had a whole bunch. And this
is another one where the hype gets in the way of the actual adventure, right?
100%.
Just like Turn of Fortune Wheels, like it's plane hopping. Actually, you spend most of your time on one plane. This one was hyped as a war campaign. There's a couple battles. I did not like the execution of this one. The thing that really holds this one back is his extreme railroadiness. The thing that's cool about this one is I think there is a lot you can do to kind of loosen it up, give players a lot more freedom and choice in how to fight and execute this war. It means that, it's going to be you doing a lot of the writing and work as opposed to the module. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I expected... Here's the thing. I wouldn't have liked this, but I expected some ambitious, rules about mass combat or even a tie-in with the Dragonlance board game, which I would have hated.
Well, there is a tie-in to the board game, and that's where the rules for mass combat got shunted.
Sorry, they did do
sucks.
This. Sorry, they did do that. I forgot. I had memory hold that. So that was bad, but that does fit in unique and interesting, which is why I don't have a deep seething hatred for this campaign. Matt is right, though. That's all kind of a sidebar to what is a pretty standard railroad D&D style adventure. Go here, fight this guy. Go here, get this thing. Go here because a powerful NPC told you to. Blah, 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 blah. Big fight with dragons at the end. It's not the most boring version of that, and it comes, in a well-designed package with some cool art and, I don't know. I can't ever see myself running this. I can see myself borrowing parts of it, and there are bits of it that are somewhat interesting, but in general, what the bill of goods that we were presented was not what we got. It was not like a big sweeping war campaign with a different focus, a different emphasis, lots of mass combat. There's a little bit, and it didn't really matter. And so that
go
is
listen
kind of
to
annoying.
our full episode on this with Megan, who has also written several supplements and kind of to beef up and fix some of the weaker parts of this adventure. For me, Rob, this one is I don't know if it's better than Vecna Eve of Ruin. It's definitely C or F tier. I could see it
I'd
somewhere
put
on
this
the
in a
line
C.
between those.
I don't feel insulted by this one. It needs a lot of work. If you love Dragonlance, I think that there is something that you can salvage from this. If you don't, I would not bother.
All right. Let's put it at the bottom of C tier and move on from Kryn. Which we should note is maybe not Rob and I's either of our favorite worlds. So, if you really love Kryn, you might like this one more.
You might like this better than we did, yeah.
Which takes us from there to Light. Light of Xerxes. Which
Matt forgot what we were reading, and now he's
one.
upset because it's Light of Xerxes, which was part of the Spelljammer box set. The 3-part adventure / setting book / whatever. Light of Xerxes, wild space. Matt, why don't you like this? Why don't you love?
Okay. So this is a great concept. The players, have they got to stop an evil empire. They have a ship. They travel. They do actually travel around through space.
Yes.
However, it is, again, it's one of the box set adventures, so it's much, much shorter. There's much less space to do things. The connective tissue is you have to do this next thing, and then this next thing happens. I would say that many of the encounters in this are actually quite good and quite interesting. It's the way that players are allowed to do things and choose stuff. The sort of core concept of Spelljammer, which is you're in charge of your own ship, never really happens because there's always someone telling players exactly what to do. However, despite this, I do think there's a lot that's fixable. The railroad can easily be knocked away, and as long as the players have the goal, hey, stop this evil empire, there's stuff you can do with that.
This one meets some of my criteria in that it has some memorable characters and locations and items. There's a lot of parts of this that are fun. Some of the spell jamming when you get to do it is super neat. There's some great like wild space art, like it's very evocative, but it is mostly like a big stupid railroad the villains don't make any sense and the plot doesn't really make any sense. But there's a lot I think I like about this that could be borrowed and could be salvaged. So we have
a whole episode on this one, just FYI. Feel free to listen to that.
My main disappointment about this one was that like it just gave me a taste of like what could have been, you know,
right?
Like what
so close.
What a better adventure there might be in here. You know, this is one where I was motivated to like fix it and do something different.
This is the definition of a fixer-upper, and I would say this is on the higher end. This
is a high C, maybe even a B, but let's put it in C for now.
Is it above Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen?
Absolutely. I think it's above it. I would put this in Lunch Pail, even though we called it a fixer-upper. We can leave it in Lunch Pail for now, but I think this is one of...
We reserve the right to readjust.
Yeah. But I did like a lot of... Like, there's instead of like one thing, there's several things that I can praise about this that were fun. It was short, it didn't make any sense, and it wasn't well written, but there were good ideas, and I could work with this. Much easier than I could work with any of the others we've discussed.
Speaking of the others, the next one is Dragon of Stormwreck Island. So this one is another one of our...
wrong. It's Dragons of Stormwreck Isle.
Sorry, there's also another starter set called Dragon of Icefire Peak.
We're an hour in, and we've got like most of them left. I'm already getting punchy. So, listeners, I was getting
angry. Hope you're in for the long haul as we get spicier and spicier.
But yeah, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle. This was a newish one. Yeah.
Right, this one comes in one of the starter sets, the 2022 starter set. It's very short, right? It's a 60-page adventure in 4 short parts that takes players from 1 to 3. You know, on this one, you really have to compare it to other starting kind of adventures that start at 1 level or are shorter. This one, in my opinion, while it does have 2 interesting, it's got 3 parts, 2 of them are kind of interesting, it in no way compares to Lost Mine of Phandelver. Rob, can I give you an example so you'll believe me? In Lost Mine of Phandelver, the players are given a clear goal as a party. In this one, they're given goals as individuals. You can already see that's maybe not as good. It's fine to have both, but you should always have that party goal. Lost Mine of Phandelver has the first encounter. The players discover a mysterious, destroyed wagon, right? And they investigate it, and there's a sense of foreboding. They can maybe spot an ambush coming. In this one, the players arrive on the titular isle. They get out of their boat, and 3 zombies walk towards them. And that's it. And you're not really given, they have to go talk to someone to figure out why these zombies are attacking. Like, there's no clues on the zombies to what's going on here. There's nothing to follow up on. It's like, hey, now I know those zombies were interesting, but you better go talk to this very important and kindly NPC who is actually a very powerful dragon that could solve all your problems for you, but won't for no apparent reason. You need to go do that. I will say the redeeming thing is that if everything is so on rails that if you were afraid of running a campaign not being on rails, then that's okay. The final chapter has like some ability for players to like branch out, have different approaches, solve things. Like there's things they can do in this last dungeon. The other 2 are pretty forgettable. I will also point out that many of the art references the 80s D&D cartoon, which is another glup shitification reference that makes me mad. This might be the worst of the 3 starting adventures.
All right, Matt, where do we put it?
Like, I don't know if I'm completely insulted, because you could change some things. You would have to work very, very hard, and it's very, very short, so you could actually get it done. So it's either at the top of F tier because I was only insulted a little bit, or at the very bottom of C tier.
Well,
let's put it at the bottom of
put it
C
in C.
tier
Yeah.
tomorrow. Okay.
Okay,
All
that's
right.
Dragons of Stormwreck Isle.
C tier. All right, now we're on to another anthology, Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel.
This is another one that we have a whole episode on, which you can listen to. This one is our beautiful neolib utopia where the Social Democrats run a floating crystal in space and you go on adventures from it.
Yes. Sadly, this actually framing device is better than two of our other framing devices.
We complained so much about it, but now we have experienced many worse framing devices. So,
right. But I want to move past the framing device because some of the short modules in Journeys to the Radiant or through the Radiant Citadel either have concepts or execution that are so good that on their own they're S tier. Some of them are very bad, but many of them are so good.
Some of my favorite adventures ever are in this. This is one of the ones where they
Written in Blood. Remember that one?
Written in Blood. This is one of the ones where they got new writers to contribute to Quest of the Radiant Citadel, often non-white writers, and it shows. There's just a real breath of fresh air. Written in Blood, so good.
Between Tangled Roots, remember the Dragon Sky Bridges and this open-ended quest your characters can go on?
Yes. I loved this. This was a mixed bag, but I actually loved The Fiend of Hollow Mine, which was it had a bunch of really cool people, monsters, a great overall adventure, excellent theme. Actually, I don't know that there were any in this that I didn't.
The other Mind one was really bad.
Oh, that's right.
The Gold for
Fools and Princes. That's right. That one was kind of a so-so. That's right.
I really like
Mine was Sanseet Lan, which was amazing. Written in Blood was Written in Blood.
Shadow of the Sun.
Sorry, I was just remembering one of the best horror adventures I have ever read.
Yes.
So good.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I will second that. Oh yeah, you can see how you would fix up a shadow in the sun and how it could be amazing, even though as written it doesn't quite give players any options at all. Again, that one was another sock dim brain adventure, but the Night Seas Sucker was one of my favorite. That one would be unforgettable tier. I would say the highs of this one are so high, and obviously you're not going to have an anthology with this many things without having some duds.
Yeah, I'd say there's only one or two duds, and only one of them is really bad. And we make fun of the framing device, but it sort of doesn't matter. It's not important. It doesn't detract from the adventure. I would say that there's so much to like in this. I think this is at least. I would say this is solid A tier. This is an A tier, our best anthology yet. One of my favorites.
Yeah,
maybe my favorite.
Let's put it in A tier for now.
Okay.
Could go higher, could go lower, but I would say A tier for Journeys of the Radiant Citadel is perfectly fine.
All right,
which brings us
take a quick break.
To a quick break.
Another drink, and then we'll go.
All right. Everyone, let's grab a beer and then continue on with our tier list. Just while Rob's getting his drink, updating everyone on the stats. So far, we don't have any S tiers. We have in the A tier, Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel. B tier, Keys from the Golden Vault and Spelljammer Adventures in Space. That's Light of Xerxes. C tier, Quest from the Infinite Staircase. Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen, Dragon of Stormwreck Isle, and the F tier we have Vecna, Eve of Ruin, the Shattered Obelisk, and Planescape, A Turn of Fortune's Wheel. Stay tuned.